Lisa from the blog farmhouseonboone.com, and today I want to show you how to make my favorite rustic granola recipe. So granola is something that I love to make in my home. I prefer to make it on a weekly basis just so that we have a jar of granola sitting out on the countertop so that whenever someone complains of being hungry, we can get them a little bit of yogurt with some homemade granola in it. It's just a great snack to have on hand. It's made with all natural, healthy ingredients, and it's super simple to make. So let me show you my recipe. Now I start by getting a large saucepan going on medium heat. To that, I add about 3/4 cups of melted oil. So I'll get the oil melting, and then I like it to be around 3/4 cups after it's melted. Now, I get mine in bulk from an Amish community nearby. It's actually a lot cheaper that way. Whenever I don't make it out there, I end up getting it from Aldi. But we use a lot of coconut oil whenever we do go. I grab 10 gallons just because I'll go through it. We use it for cooking and body products and diaper creams and just all kinds of stuff. It's a multi-purpose use in our home. So I'm gonna get this going and then measure because I like my granola crispy, and I find that whenever you add just the right amount of oil, it feels like you're having like store-bought cereal. It's really good. Now if you get too much oil, it's kind of sopping in the oil, and then if you have not enough, it's a soft granola versus that crispy granola, which I love. Now I like to make mine with quite a bit of nuts and coconut and other things other than oatmeal, so the grains component is a little bit less, but it also would be good with just oatmeal. There's a lot of ways you can make granola. This is my favorite recipe. Now while this is melting, I'm gonna go ahead and get some nuts going. So for this recipe, I like to have 3 cups of nuts that are chopped. So I like to use walnuts and pecans. You could use just walnuts, just pecans, a combination of the two. You could use almonds. Other nuts like macadamia nuts are good. Use those. One thing about the almonds is they're a little bit too crunchy. And so if you have kids eating this, you might wanna leave out the almonds. That's what I find. These nuts are a little bit softer and the kids can handle them. Now, if you have some super picky kids, you might wanna make them a little bit smaller when you're going to process them and chop them up, or you could keep them larger and just have a more rustic cereal. So I'm gonna do mine about medium coarseness. All right, this is almost melted. Meanwhile, I have the oven going at 350 degrees. So I'm gonna pour this into this measuring cup to get around the 3/4 cup. All right, that is really, really close. It's a little bit more than 3/4 cups. I'm just gonna leave it. But if you have too much, you of course can pour it back into your coconut oil. I've never had any bad effects from doing that. I just pour it right back in and it hardens right back up, especially in the winter. So I'm gonna turn off the heat because I don't really need to cook it beyond this point, except for in the oven. That was just to melt the oil. Now to that, I'm gonna add a 1/2 cup of honey. All right, to that, I'm gonna add 3 cups of my chopped nuts. You can see I kept mine kind of at a medium coarseness. They're not all the way ground up. Now I'm going to add 2 cups of oats. I just use old-fashioned oats. Don't use the quick cooking, I just use the regular ones. And 8 ounces of coconut chips. Now sometimes I like to do a combination of coconut chips and shredded coconut. These add a nice rustic texture, which is why I'm using them for this rustic granola recipe. Unsweetened, not cooked, just raw, dried coconut is what you want. And then about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I always add salt to my sweet recipes. It just brings out the flavor and makes it so delicious. Gonna give that all a stir to make sure everything is nicely coated with the honey and oil mixture. Now at this point you could also add cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. I'm gonna keep this very basic. It's good year round and it has such few ingredients that if you keep the dry ingredients in your pantry, you can whip this up at a moment's notice. I do that all the time and I will sometimes just use what I have. So if I have no coconut, there's more nuts or oatmeal. If I have less nuts, I use more coconut, and this recipe is tested, tried and true. All right, I'm gonna add this to a 9 by 13 baking dish and then get it going in the oven on 350 degrees. It'll need to bake for about 30 minutes, but make sure to stir it halfway through because it will start to get browned too much on the top and not enough on the bottom if you don't. All right, I've just set my timer to 15 minutes to start baking that granola, stirring it halfway, and then another 15 minutes. Now, meanwhile, I'm gonna chop up some dried apricots. So this is what makes my granola recipe a little bit unique. I don't know that I've ever seen one with apricots, but I got the idea to start adding a bunch of different dried fruits in, and it is amazing. It tastes so good. Now, apricots are, of course, a little bit large, so what I do is I just chop them up in about 4 to 6 pieces per apricot. You can make them a little larger, smaller, whatever you prefer. This is what I think is the best tasting for this rustic granola. The whole idea is that everything's kind of large. That's why I add the coconut chips and the large pieces of apricot and the nuts, and it is just such a good cereal. If you are a family that's kind of on the go and you find yourself needing quick meal options, this is just so simple with some homemade yogurt with a little bit of honey or just as a bowl of cereal. So for this recipe, I like to use about a cup of fruit. I do a combination, whatever you have on hand, but my favorite is apricots, cranberries, and golden raisins. I've also done blueberries, cherries. All taste so good in any combination that you choose. So I'm gonna get about a cup in here, ready for when the granola is done baking. I'm just gonna toss it with the dried fruit. When this is all done, I'm gonna toss it with the dried fruit, and then I like to store it in one of these glass jars, and I just keep one out on my counter most of the time. You've probably seen it on my videos in the background. Just a good way to have a little snack ready to go, and you can get this going on a weekly basis. All right, well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you are brand new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I'd be glad to have you following along. I make 2 new videos every single week on food from scratch, natural living, and a handmade home. Thank you so much for stopping by our farmhouse.